Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about how presentation of movies can influence the opinions that people form on it, looking at the Top Gun franchise. Also answering the question of, is it propaganda, which is a very common thing people like to ask these days, and for good reason. It provides a lot of evidence toward that opinion. Let's see how people get there. So you've probably heard about the statistic that Top Gun made Navy recruitment go up 500% the year it came out, which isn't exactly true, but it did go up a pretty good amount. These days, like we said in the introduction, people like to talk about its usage as military propaganda. We're going to evaluate that claim using Dr. Russell Ortega Milligan's suggestions of three major things to look at when analyzing this sort of thing. Think about who owns and controls the message. Think about where there may be bias, and then think about the presence of stereotypes. We're going to answer those questions by using clips and portrayals from both to investigate that. Starting with the most interesting question of who's in control of the message, we find that producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who was involved in both movies, collaborated with the Pentagon both times to supply fighter jets and get Navy resources in both. They also got extensive input into the script, which actually fundamentally changed the makeup of the first movie. It's a familiar tactic from other regimes from the past. On the left, we have the movie Battleship Potemkin from 1920s Soviet Union. And on the right, we have Triumph of the Will from 1930s German movies. There is a subtle difference in that Eisenstein and Riefenstahl got full creative control when it came to making these movies, but at the same time, their ultimate goal was to produce effective propaganda. And based on these regimes, it worked very well. And Top Gun is a different flavor of that same idea. Even if it wasn't necessarily Ronald Reagan or Joe Biden telling the producers to make the movie a certain way, the fact that the Pentagon had as much of a say in it as they did is a pretty solid indicator that there is some bias in the messaging. We'll get to that in a minute, though. One other thing of note is that recruiters from the Navy, such as this guy on the right in 2022 during the Top Gun Maverick showings, came by to theaters to recruit people who went and saw the movie. It worked a lot better the first time, but there were slight effects the second time around as well. In fact, in '86, it actually worked well enough to where in 2020, Tom Cruise and Bruckheimer earned the Honorary Naval Aviator Award. This picture is them receiving that award. Now, when I mentioned that the Pentagon helping produce the movie would bring in some bias, I'm mainly referring to the fact that the Navy is very obviously the good guy in both of these movies. Even though the villain isn't stated in clear terms, the understanding of who it's supposed to be is there. Another thing to notice is the bias toward the men of the story, where the writing priority goes. Women exist in the movies, such as Charlie from the first one and Phoenix from the second one. Their characters are a lot less fleshed out than characters like Iceman, Maverick, Goose, Rooster, Hangman. Even Bob gets more of a comic relief role than any of the women do in the movies. And so by thinking about those things, you're able to tell who the Navy is wanting to get out of these screenings. When we're looking at the stereotypes, a lot of it boils down to the macho components of being a Top Gun pilot, such as the argument that Iceman and Maverick have in the locker room around the middle of the movie. Now, another thing is that Maverick's characterization and his actions in both movies also feed into the idea that one guy can get it all, which is a pretty interesting contrast to the portrayals of the Brotherhood of the Navy, such as the volleyball scene from the first one that actually has some really interesting subtext that people that are more knowledgeable about the culture have gone into. But what I'm going to look at is the more sanitized beach scene from Maverick. Now, for this, just have a look at it and think to yourself, if I was a little more impressionable, or if I am impressionable, how much sway is seeing this going to have on whether or not I want to go be in the Navy? All of that adds up to a pretty compelling tale of what it's going to be like in the Navy. It's a recruiting tactic that works pretty effectively because of the fact that the image makes it seem like the Navy is a very cool thing to be a part of. You have all these very attractive actors contributing to that message and showing that you can get camaraderie where you may not be able to get it anywhere else. And so, in my eyes, it's totally understandable why people signed up to join the Navy after seeing the movie, and it also adds up to why people claim it's military propaganda, because in some ways it is, and it's very effective. Now that we've looked into that, let's test our knowledge. Let's say that you decide to watch a movie about a significant historical event. What aspects should you consider to see if it was made to sway your opinion? I'll give you some time to think about what your answer is. Feel free to pause the video as well. Now, the right answer is A. Each of these have some element of truth to them, but A is the most direct way to go about it because looking at the potential biases that the cast and crew may hold can tell you a whole lot about how they want you to focus on things, whether that be the way they shoot something, the way a performance is directed. That's going to be a much clearer picture of what they want you to think than something like how much money it made at the box office or B and D, which are two sides of the same coin in terms of what answers they give. Because there's much more intent behind the biases that are put in, even if they aren't actively thought of during the filmmaking process. Now, looking at Top Gun, we can conclude that a lot of times all it takes is to ask a few simple questions and answer them in depth and to get an idea of how the movie is made to figure out what the producers and what the crew wanted you to get from that movie. Next time, we're going to be looking at charismatic con men and their influence, which is something that we've been seeing a lot of. A few years ago, we saw it with Andrew Tate. This year, we're seeing it very heavily with Clavicular and his sycophants. But you can also look at movies and see the same effect being mirrored. We're going to be looking at movies like Fight Club and American Psycho to really investigate this. Thank you for your time.